Let's have a read of this. This is from the Independent.ie, and it's behind a paywall, but this is the full article, right? So for those who are a little bit more open and knowledgeable, or intuitive even, around politics, geopolitics, international arrangements between peoples, organizations, and high-flying businessmen, billionaires who are involved in blackmailing rings, right? This sort of stuff. And we've seen the court cases that are relevant to that, right? It will come as no surprise here when I read this. So the heading: high-profile ex-politician due in court on charges of migrant trafficking and indecent images of children, right? So we'll have a read of it. A high-profile former politician is due to appear in court charged as part of a migrant trafficking investigation. The Dublin-based man is facing one charge of facilitating the entry of an illegal immigrant into the state and a second charge of possessing child pornography. He is previously arrested as part of a long-running inquiry by the Garda National Immigration Bureau, which has been ongoing for over 3 years. Properties and vehicles have been searched as part of the inquiry, and a number of electronic devices as well as documents also seized and analysed. The alleged offences occurred in the dates 2021 and 2022, but do not coincide with his time in office. Since leaving politics after many years, the man has worked in a separate sector. He has enjoyed a high profile both during his time in politics and after leaving office. The investigation began over 3 years ago after immigration officials at Dublin Airport reported suspicions about alleged people smuggling. So, what is interesting about this is not so much that it happens, it is the minimization of the impact that these stories have in the public mind, in the public consciousness, right? So we have an ex-high-profile politician, right? And he's been charged with one count of essentially trafficking someone in here illegally, right, when they shouldn't have been here illegally. And counts of being in possession of child abuse material, right, or indecent photos or images or media of a child, right? And that brings up a couple of questions. Like, so number one is, are the two instances linked? Are they separate instances? And while he was being investigated for one, he got stung for another one, right? Also, was he potentially, or she, I think it's a he, potentially blackmailed due to having the images or having a predilection for that kind of dirt, right? Was he blackmailed in order to facilitate what looks like trafficking, right? So is this what's hanging over? Because we can expand on that, right? So for people who will kind of knee-jerk response and go, that doesn't happen, they might vote, there might be fraud in America in terms of voting, but not in Ireland, right? There might be high-profile blackmail honeypot rings in America, but not in Ireland, right? Not in Ireland, never in Ireland, right? When there's like demonstrable proof that this stuff has been happening and continues to happen in Ireland. So we're on solid ground here. We have an instance here where a high-profile ex-politician is up in court over these two things, trafficking and child abuse, right? So how many others are there? Because we have the precedent set now, so we know there's at least one, right? We know that there's at least one. Guilt and all that stuff, let the court sort, all that sort of stuff, right? But let's assume that this man is totally guilty of these things. We know that there's one. We also know the networking underbelly of politics, big industry, public sector, Gardaí, media, all that stuff, right? It's a club, right, essentially, in the loosest term possible, or maybe in the strictest term possible, depending on how tight certain elements of these institutions are, right? So if there is one, there might be many. In which case, how many? How many people are sitting in office now and making decisions based on the fact that they are compromised? Maybe heavily, heavily compromised to depths that we may never discover. Future generations may be able to read about it, right? JFK sort stuff. 50 years later, 100 years later, when everyone involved in it is long gone and no one can be implicated again, then the information's released and made public, right? Generations later. Church stuff, right? All that kind of thing. Politician stuff as well. Let us not fall into the black or white thing where it was either the church doing it or it was the politicians doing it. How about both? And more, maybe, right? So, this stuff is also not new to Ireland. It's not new. We've had countless reports, we've had countless instances, and also just ear to the ground. We all know someone who's experienced living in Ferry House, being in schools, being in the church, all that sort of stuff, right? We all know this. It's generations old. And what's been steadily coinciding with all of those things? Politicians, the political system, which for generations now has been veering away from anything that looks like Irish-grounded, Irish-rooted solutions to problems. They've been gone another way altogether, right? Why? Because if Timmy and Jimmy can sit in the pub, right, or sit watching a match and talk about better solutions to the issues in this country, but the people that are paid to do that job are completely bereft of any sort of common sense, then what is the explanation for such totalitarian measures that have been taken, right? That just happen to coincide with what the majority of other nations are doing, that happen to be involved in these little groups, unelected groups, right? These secret societies that have gone beyond being secret. They're now televising themselves. They have their little logos, they have their little creeds, they have their badges, right? They have their members, they have their leaders. They speak about these things. These leaders speak about how they have infiltrated governments, right? They might not use such espionage sort language, but they speak about it openly on television for you to watch it if you want to go and look at it, right? If you're that interested. But they bank on you not being interested. That's why they feel so brazen to be able to come out and do it publicly, right? So all of these sorts of things, we all have an understanding of it, but not in Ireland, right? People fall back on that as if perhaps a part of romanticism, or perhaps it's part of projecting the goodness in ourselves onto our nation and everyone that's in that nation, and assuming because there's goodness in us, everyone else is the same, and Ireland as a nation is just the same, right? No bad things happen here. Other countries, of course they do, but should them Americans, but not in Ireland, right? But yes, absolutely in Ireland. So these stories, this isn't an isolated incident either, right? So you've had people that have been working with Tusla who've been arrested for possession of the worst materials, right? You can go back generations. You had Phil Hogan come out and use this Dáil privilege to speak of witness testimony of ministers for education or people that were part of the Department of Education who were going around and abusing children in these state-run homes, right? Up to the point where abuse of animals was even linked to it. Crazy stuff. But disgusting stuff. Not that crazy because it's based in reality, right? But disgusting stuff. Look into the guards. How many guards have been charged? Well, maybe not charged, but how many guards have had thousands and thousands of euros worth of drugs missing from the evidence rooms? How many of them are involved in stalking ex-partners, right? Or using their own colleagues to stalk ex-partners or ex-partners' new partners, right? All these sorts of horrible, horrible stories. Domestic hells, right? You had guards who were selling passports to people. You have these international human trafficking rings from Eastern European countries coming in here. You've people from El Salvador coming in here, Right? How legitimate are they? What are they involved in? Why is there so many drugs around the place? Right? This country is absolutely destroyed with all sorts of criminality. It is a hotbed for criminality. We rank we rank nearly the worst country for tackling human trafficking in Europe. And yet we continue to see Albanian gangs, Georgian gangs caught up in this stuff, right? Nigerian gangs caught up in this stuff. Police caught up in this stuff. And now politicians caught up in this stuff. Who just happen to be PDF files as well, right? So can you see what this is all about? See the P. Diddy thing, look at the Jeffrey Epstein thing, look at the Jimmy Savile thing, all that sort of stuff, right? That's what you're looking at. The foundational element to all of this stuff is right in your face, and it's been spoken about now. You're being offered it up. So my question on all of this is, how many of those in the Dáil now are how many of them are highly compromised people? How many of them have sat in the Dáil decade after decade after decade, knowing that there was generations of children abused by people in positions of authority in this country who used and abused that authority to use and abuse children, and they sat on that, and they never lifted a finger to combat that in any way or to reveal anything about it? How many of those people are related to people who done the same thing over the generations, right? So that's what you're dealing with. You're not dealing with people that see themselves as just extensions of us or even peers to us. You're dealing with blue bloods here. You're dealing with modern day nobility, right? At least in terms of how they see themselves. They are the upper echelons, and we are those that need to be controlled and managed, right? That's how these things are done, right? And how do you assure that those that get into positions of power don't turn on those who put them there? You have to have blackmail ability over these people. It's as simple as that. In order to get into any sort of gang, you have to run the gauntlet, so to speak, right? They have to have something on you because you're going to have something on them. That's the deal with the devil, right? The dirty handshake. That's how it goes. And now you're seeing instances of this. Who is this politician? Why not give out his name? Right? He's automatically a danger. Why not put out his name? Because the media and guards and the whole lot, up and down, it's all the same state, the same system, right? They're very quick to release the names, addresses, occupations even of people that are protesting to keep their community safe. But when you have the most dangerous of entity, which is a politician who has a dirty taste for children, not interested in giving out the name, right? And I think the court case, or he's due in front of court later this month. We'll see what comes of that. And just another one, you also have members of GSOC who are at parties with Jerry Hutch following his court case, right? You can look at that and go, wow, well, that could happen to anyone. Or you could look at that and go, does the party start or end in that room? Right?